Okay, let's get started. This session is called Communication Mastery, 4 factors that dramatically increase the value of your content. And in this session, what we're going to do is we're going to dive deeper into what's really at the core of making your content and your products valuable. We're also going to learn communication techniques that you will use later in your marketing that will also help you make your marketing more valuable. So we're going to talk here about 4 factors that increase the value of your content. By using these 4 factors, you will increase the value. Let me say that again. By using these 4 factors, you will increase the value of your content, the interest in your content, and the value of your products. Use all 4 or your content won't be perceived as valuable. So what does this mean? Use all 4 or your content won't be perceived as valuable. In earlier trainings, you've learned that the rule is that most communication is misunderstood. Okay, most communication is not clearly understood. And so what we do is we use techniques and approaches and communication frameworks to make our ideas understandable. Well, it turns out that there are similar ideas that we use to make our content more valuable. You've been learning some of them inside of your training, and what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into 4 factors that I think if you'll just remember to use these 4 factors, you can dramatically increase the perceived value of your content. And when you increase the perceived value, what you also increase is the amount of money that people will pay for it, their trust in it, and their use of it. So very, very important. Now, what I'm about to teach you is a way of thinking that's counterintuitive for most people. In other words, this is not the way that most people think. This is not the approach that most people would take with communication. Just reading most books that are written or listening to most people that communicate will indicate this to you. And I'd like to tell you where I got these ideas. Okay? I originally learned these techniques, number 1, by studying highly successful marketing, and number 2, by doing highly successful marketing. So interestingly enough, the ideas that I'm about to teach you are really founded in strong marketing, and they have a basis in powerful, successful marketing. But they also come from good communication. As I mentioned before, most communication is misunderstood, it's unclear, and it doesn't really hit a home run with the person that's listening. It's just not really paid attention to. And when you combine really good marketing with really good communication, what you get is information and content that's riveting to other people. Okay, so let's dive in and let's learn about the 4 factors. And then let's talk about how to use them. And then what we'll do is we'll go to some questions and we'll interact about this particular set of information. So the first factor is specificity. It's be specific. And what we'll do here is we'll contrast and compare general versus specific. So for example, let's say I'm teaching weight loss. A general thing to say would be lose a lot of weight fast. That's general. Whereas specific is saying something like lose 19 pounds in 90 days. So do you see the difference here? In the first example, lose a lot of weight fast, I'm saying a lot, which could be any amount, and I'm also saying fast, which is good because people like to have things fast, but it's not specific, right? In the specific example, I say 90 days. Now, in terms of the value of this information, The second example, the specific example, lose 19 pounds in 90 days, is a lot more valuable, much higher perceived value than lose a lot of weight fast. Now, there are many reasons for this, by the way, and the main reason for this is that specific communication is clearly understandable and it's more believable. It's something that sounds like it can be verified, like it can be validated, and therefore it sounds like something you can nail down and you can believe it. Most people tend to talk in generalities. I actually am guilty of this a lot of the time. Catch myself doing it all the time. In fact, I did it right there when I said I catch myself doing it all the time, right? I'm just being very general. And what we don't realize is that as humans, in order to just become more efficient with communication, we take these shortcuts and we make up lots of generalities. We don't know that when we're communicating, teaching, when we're trying to show people how things work, when we're creating products, marketing, that generalities actually hurt us because they don't sound believable, they're not easily understandable, and they're not trustable. When you say lose a lot of weight fast, you sound just like everybody else that's teaching weight loss. When you say lose 19 pounds in 90 days, that sounds like something that I can really wrap my head around. And it sounds like something that's likely to happen. It sounds like you've got a plan. When you start adding on to this, okay, and you start saying something like, when you use my specific meal plan and exact diet and exercise plan that I outline in Chapter 4, when you stick to it, you're going to lose 19 pounds in 90 days. And when you add more specificity, it sounds more and more and more believable. When, on the other hand, you use more generalities and you say, I'm going to teach you inside of my product how to lose a lot of weight fast so you can feel good, okay, it's just not compelling. There isn't anything that sounds like it's really going to happen. Nothing that sounds like at the end of the day it's going to be believable. Now, you could use this in a lot of different places. Okay, I'll just give you a couple of more examples that I'll riff on so that you get a feel for it. If I'm selling a motor upgrade for your car, and I say, buy this motor upgrade and your car will have more power, okay, that's a general way of saying it. If I say, buy this motor upgrade and your car will have 50 more horsepower, that's even more specific. If I say, buy this motor upgrade and install it, which only takes 30 minutes, you'll have 50 more horsepower and your car will go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in only 4.7 seconds. And now that sounds even more specific, more believable, because now I'm talking about how long it takes to install it, and I'm talking about something that's tangible that I can, really wrap my head around, which is now I can go from 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds. Now, when most people hear this, especially when they're teachers, they stop and they say, well, this, I don't know, some of this just sounds like it's taking the long way. It doesn't sound like I'm really getting to the point. Well, that is a trade-off that we have to face here. Taking the longer way sometimes actually gets us to where we want to go faster and better when we're selling information. And when you're more specific, you're more believable, and therefore your content and your product has more valuable. Let me say that again. You're more specific. When you're more specific, it's more believable, and therefore your content has more value. So let's talk about the second factor after specific. And it's concrete. And what we're going to do here is we're going to contrast intangible with concrete. Intangible with concrete. And intangible is something that I can't look at, I can't see, I can't prove that it happened, whereas concrete is something that definitely happened in the real world, something that if there were some observers around, they could say, yes, that thing happened. So here's an example. An intangible statement might be, he will communicate his love more, versus a concrete statement is, he will ask you to marry him. Okay, so let's say that you're teaching dating advice or how to get a husband. If I say, if you read my book, you're going to figure out how to get your man to communicate more or communicate his love more. That's attractive, right? Most women would like it if a man communicated his love more. But if you say, read my book and he will ask you to marry him, okay, that's something that's concrete. It's something that's tangible. Something that if a group of people were standing around, they would say, that thing actually happened. In language, we can communicate in one of two ways. Okay? One of two ways. The first way is called abstract, and the other way might be called concrete or descriptive. When I communicate abstractly, I'm saying things like the word communicate and love. Communication is at a very, very high level of abstraction. It includes all types of communication, body language, words, eye contact. When I say the word love, it's at a very high level of abstraction. It encompasses all different types of behaviors and patterns and emotions and relationships. On the other hand, when I say words like, he will ask you to marry him, I could even become more specific and say, he will say the words, will you marry me? I'm now getting more specific, more concrete, more tangible. And when we're communicating in our content, in our training, and also in our marketing later, we want to be as concrete as possible. We want to stay away from that abstract, theoretical, very vague, general communication style, and we want to talk about concrete things that really happened. Intelligent people like to use abstractions, and they like to use very fancy, highfalutin sounding language. If you've ever read a college textbook, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Very theoretical, lots of words with shun at the end, lots of words that just sound like college professors and philosophers or something should be saying them. When you read one of the direct mail sales letters that you get in the mail that has, been mailed 1 million times, that's not the way it sounds. In fact, it's the opposite. In those direct mail sales letters, they're talking about very specific actions and very specific results because they know that concrete and specific is much more believable and much more valuable. So I ask you, how can you take what it is that you're teaching and break it down into the concrete, make it tangible, not use any abstract terms, any words that are theoretical, and only use descriptive language that has to do with taking real action in the real world. That's concrete. When you talk about concrete and tangible and physical, that's when you start communicating with humans in a way that they say, now I understand what you're talking about, that's what I want, and that sounds valuable to me. Okay, let's talk about the third factor. And this is the factor of emotion, emotional communication. And here we're going to contrast rational versus emotional. Rational thought, rational processing, actually happens in a different part of the brain, essentially, from emotional processing. It operates in a very different way. Of course, they interact with each other and they work together, but rational is very logical, whereas emotional is, based on a feeling that comes up. So here's an example. And let's say for the sake of this one that you were teaching people how to get out of debt. So a rational communication would be, getting out of debt is a logical financial step towards security, versus an emotional or an irrational phrase might be, the day you pay off your last credit card will feel like getting out of financial prison. The day you pay off your last credit card will feel like getting out of financial prison. Now notice how you feel as you listen to those two statements. First one, getting out of debt is a logical financial step towards security. How do you feel? What happens there? Well, when I say those words, and I notice how I feel, I kind of feel like I'm standing up and taking responsibility, like I'm behaving like an adult, like I'm making the rational choice. I'm doing the responsible thing here. When I say the words, the day you pay off your last credit card will feel like getting out of financial prison, I actually have a feeling inside of me that feels like freedom, like there's a heavy weight on my shoulders and I'm trapped in a cage, and all of a sudden I get out, I escape. I don't know if you've ever had the experience, but I've had the experience of being in tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt and paying them off, and the feeling that comes with that is it really does feel like you're escaping from financial prison. So guess which one has a higher perceived value, rational or emotional? Well, you guessed right if you guessed emotional, because the emotional is the thing that motivates. Motivation is an emotional function. If your emotions are driving you, then you're motivated. And if your emotions aren't driving you, then you're not motivated. So emotion motivates. It pushes people to get up off their butts and to do things. It's the thing that you really want to trigger here. Now, just like specific and concrete, which, by the way, you'll notice here we've included in this example. Okay, so the day you pay off your last credit card will feel like getting out of financial prison. This is specific, concrete, and it's also emotional. What we're talking about is, let me start that over. Let me say that a different way. When you combine these three factors, specific, concrete, and emotional, what you start doing is you start going past the superficial or the persona or the first level of a person's processing or of their mind, and you start really talking to them on a level that makes kind of native sense to them. You start talking to them in the language that they're accustomed to thinking in. You're thinking and talking in a way that makes sense to all humans that you communicate with, as long as they speak the language. But what you're also doing is you're communicating using a style that most people don't use. Again, that's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive for someone who's, maybe teaching a person how to eat better because this person wants to lose some weight naturally. It's counterintuitive to be speaking always specifically about concrete things and emotionally getting them motivated. And it's much more usual to be talking about things like diets and more abstract ideas like exercise and ideas that are logical and that make sense, like the right balance of diet and exercise. Right? These are very abstract ideas. Now you might say, well, exercise, that is concrete, but it's actually not. The word exercise is a general category. If you say, do 10 push-ups, that's something that's specific and concrete. And when you add emotional on top of it, that's when you really start having a lot of power. So always talk to the irrational driver, the emotional driver. And as we've been learning here, the best way to discover most of these things, of course, is to be asking customers. They will be telling you the exact things that they want to learn specifically. they'll be telling you in words that are concrete if you listen. And when you ask what's your biggest fear, what's the specific result that you want, etc., that's when you get the emotional stuff, which leads us to the fourth idea, which is connected to the result. Connected to the result. And here what I'd like to do is draw a distinction between the means to get something and the result itself, or the ends. So there's a distinction between the means and the ends, or the means versus the result. So if you are going to drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco, the means might be the Interstate 5, and you drive on it to get to San Francisco, and the end is being in San Francisco. They're two very different things. So let's say that I'm teaching dating advice to men. I could say, a woman's favorite thing to hear versus exactly what to say to get a date. Okay, so there's a very different kind of approach that I'm talking about here. People are not really interested in learning the means to something. What they want is the result. They want the result itself. Now we, as teachers, as coaches, as advisors to people, we have a little bit of a conundrum because most of what we teach is a means to get to something. If you're teaching someone how to lose weight, you're going to be teaching them things like how to eat differently and how to exercise differently. Those are the means to losing the weight. But the customer, the audience, the learner, the student, they only really care about the result. So as you're incorporating various techniques and various ideas and so forth into your training, into your content, into your newsletters, ultimately into every part of your business, you always want to keep coming back and connecting it up to the result. Always keep coming back and connecting it to the result. So in this case here, if I was teaching a chapter on how to communicate better with the opposite sex, I would have a section and I would say, I'm about to show you exactly what to say when you meet a woman to get a date. In fact, I'm going to give you a proven 10-word phrase that I have tested in many situations that will guarantee that she won't reject you, and it will also increase the probability that she will say yes to a date. And in fact, when she does say yes, it means that she's going to show up for sure. Okay, so all very specific, concrete, emotional, obviously, because we're talking about dating, but it's connected to that result, which is get the date, right? And in every situation, what you have to ask yourself is, what's the result that my customer really wants here? What is it that they really want? And oftentimes, the result that we think that they want isn't the result that they actually want. For example, someone might be coming to you to learn how to lose 20 pounds, but they actually aren't doing it just to lose 20 pounds. They're doing it because they're single and they can't get a date, and they want to get a date. Or someone wants to, they come to you and they want to get out of debt. Maybe they don't want to get out of debt just because they want to get out of debt. Maybe they want to get out of debt because they're afraid that they're going to have to work for the rest of their life and they're never going to be able to retire. And so to them, getting out of debt is just the first step toward moving toward retirement. So the result that the person actually wants, that is something that if you use it and you say it often, what's going to happen is your content and your products are going to be perceived as much, much, much more valuable. Okay, so very importantly, we're going to use the 4 factors from now on as we're creating all of our content, all of our newsletters, all of our products. And the way I'd like you to think of them is think of them as 4 layers of mental processing that you've got going all the time in your mind. Specific, concrete, emotional, and connected to the result that your customer wants. And we're going to always be coming back to these, okay? Just like we are always coming back to why, what, how, and what if, we're always going to be coming back to and touching on specific, concrete, emotional, connected to result. I want to just remind you one more time, the way to find the specific words to use, the most emotionally motivating, concrete, the ones that are connected to the result, is to interact with your customers. And when you ask questions like, what's your biggest fear or frustration? What's your desire? How would it look if it was perfect? What's the biggest challenge that you're facing right now? And then you dig deeper into those needs and you keep digging, you're going to get the words, you're going to get the language to use to write your content, to create your articles, and to create your products. Okay, good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to some questions. And what I'd like to do is keep the questions focused on communication and increasing the value of your content. Okay, so for example, if you're creating an article right now on how to lose weight, you might want to ask a question. You might, put a couple of sentences from it into the question box here, or you might, ask a question about how you're presenting something, so that I can show you how to use these 4 factors, these 4 tools of specific, concrete, emotional, and connected to result. I'll give you a moment to think about this here. I'm only going to answer questions. We're going to stick to just this particular part of the training here on communication. You're also learning about a lot of this stuff in the other training that you're getting right now. So make sure that we really stick to this idea of how to make communication specific, concrete, emotional, connected to result. And I also want to mention that the reason why we're diving so deep into content right now, and what we're really doing is we're kind of expanding the program just a little bit, and we're kind of pausing here, is because I've gotten so many questions about this particular topic, and because I think it's so important that we all get it. We're gonna dive deep, and we're gonna stay on this until we all get it, until we all understand how to communicate in a way that's very high value and very understandable, because essentially this is your main tool. How you communicate, how you write, how you speak, the way you choose words, the way you communicate those ideas, making sure that you're emotional and connected to result. This is it's the most basic tool or basic building block, and we're not going to move on until we've really got this one. Okay, so I'm going to go now to the little question box. And what I'd like you to do is, go ahead and type in a question if you've got one on this. Okay, here we go. So here's a question from DG. Specificity. I'm about to market a seminar for small businesses. I was going to say it helps you, quote, boost productivity and, quote, engage your staff. Do I need to be more specific? Excellent question. Answer is yes. So the word productivity and the word boost, actually both of those words, boost and productivity, they're very what's called ambiguous. They could mean anything. Now, it turns out that a lot of people use the word productive because the idea itself is kind of a hard thing to describe. So productivity is a good word here. But what I would ask you is, how does it boost productivity? In other words, what's the outcome of the boost? How much more productive are you? And in what way? And I'd also ask, what are the biggest frustrations and challenges that your small business owners are having where they want to be more productive? So, for example, if you ask them, what are your biggest frustrations right now with productivity? They might come back and say, well, email right now. You say, okay, well, what about email is frustrating? And they might say, well, I'm spending a lot of time on email. every day and I'd like to spend less. And you might say, okay, well, how much time are you spending? And, how much is an amount that's frustrating? And they might come back and say, I spend 3 hours a day just on email alone. And then you might say, okay, so 3 hours is frustrating. How much time would you like to be spending on email every day? And they might come back and say, I'd really like to be spending an hour or less on email. Okay, now we've got something, because now I could say, can you teach them how to go from spending 3 hours on email to 1 hour? And you might say yes. And then I would say, okay, so you might, in your content, you might say, right now I'm going to teach you how to boost your productivity. That's a fine thing to say, as long as you say, first what I'm going to do is teach you how to go from an average of 3 hours a day wasted on email to 1 hour or less. And I'm going to teach you a simple 3-step process to do it. Now, the difference between boost productivity and reduce the time you spend answering email and working on email from 3 hours a day to 1 hour a day or less is dramatic. Okay, you can't even compare them in terms of how specific the second one is. And similarly, engage your staff, right, is also, both of these really are about as non-specific as you can get, okay, if I can go that far. They're about as general as you can be. The word engage is a very, very abstract, very general concept. And staff, right, I actually have to go through several levels of translation to even understand what you mean there. And it's a word that could mean different things. So I would say, okay, great. Did you ask your customers, what's your biggest frustration with your staff? And if they said, my biggest frustration is that my staff isn't engaged, you'd say, okay, great. Not engaged how? What's the most frustrating way that they're not engaged? And, you might the customer might come back and say, they don't show up for our meetings. Okay, well, that's a really interesting, answer. They might say something like, well, the staff doesn't answer the phone, or the staff doesn't answer the emails that I sent them. Okay, well, those are two completely different ways of engaging. So, yes, you got to drill down. You got to find out the specific, concrete, emotional result, and then you've got to talk about it. But great question. Excellent, excellent question. Here's a question from Frank. What do you mean by going the long way? So what I just did right there, Frank, is a great example. The short way is to say, I'm going to teach you how to boost your productivity. So that kind of covers everything. I could literally be teaching anything about time management or productivity in that program, and I got my bases covered. The long way is to ask the customers, what are your specific frustrations, fears, worries when it comes to time management, right? And that's, that's how to go the long way. That's the way that, that's the longer way to go. Hopefully that makes sense. Hold on just one sec here. Take a little drink of water. Okay. Next question from Luke. Hi, Eben. Could you give me a few examples as to how I can make shoulder pain and shoulder strength as concrete and tangible outcomes for my clients at the end of a 6-week program? Cheers, Luke, the shoulder guy. Excellent question. So how do we become more specific about what someone is looking for when it comes to shoulder pain? We ask the customer, what's the most frustrating thing about your shoulder pain and your shoulder strength? What's the outcome that you'd like to have? What would you like to do more? What is it that you can't do because you have shoulder pain and shoulder strength? Now, I don't know who your target audience is, but let's say, for example, that you drill down into this, and the most common answer you get from your audience is, I can't stand up from a sitting position because my shoulders hurt too much. Well, I'm going to teach you an exercise that 4 weeks from now, it's going to strengthen your shoulders so that you can stand up on your own without help. Okay, now that's specific, that's concrete, very emotional, because humans, mobility is health, essentially, and it's connected to the result that they want. Okay, so shoulder pain, shoulder strength, these are general, whereas I'm going to show you an exercise that you do for 30 days, and then you can stand up on your own without needing someone else's help. That is very specific, very tangible. Hopefully that's a good example there. Okay. Here's a question from Matt. This is an interesting one. Now that I've finished my ebook, I'd like to use Communication Mastery to hook 2 to 3 heavy hitters in my industry with a joint venture proposition. What specific numbers, figures, and other pertinent information appeals to an established entrepreneur within my industry, fitness industry? Fact is that they have huge lists that are highly targeted, and I don't. I would love to be able to pitch my fitness product to their subscribers who are actually looking for a product like mine. However, I need to make it worth that entrepreneur's time. Okay, so I'm not going to take too much time on this, Matt, because this is more of a marketing question, and it's something we'll cover later on in the program. But I like the question, and I want to point out here that what most people would do is they would email, or they'd try to reach the quote unquote heavy hitters in the industry, and they would say, I have a great fitness ebook, and I'd like you to promote it to your list. Okay, so again, very general, fitness ebook, promote to your list. And what I'm going to recommend that you do is that you get a hold of these people and you talk to them and you ask them, what are your biggest frustrations and challenges communicating with your list? What are your biggest frustrations and challenges when people come and want you to promote their stuff? What would a dream partner look like to you? And you listen to what they say. Okay, so here you've got what specific numbers, figures, and other pertinent information appeals, and I think you've got to actually go ask them what their needs are, just like anything else. Okay, they're a customer here to your process, and you've got to figure out what it is that they need, and that will answer the question for you. Okay. Here's a question from Larry. Great questions, by the way, folks. If I had a niche, which was communicating with my kids, what would be the best way to emotively relate to the parents to create an environment for their kids' communication? All right, I got to read that one again. If I had a niche, communicating with my kids, what would be the best way to emotively relate to the parents to create an environment for the kids' community? All right. So interestingly enough, Larry, you've got enough abstract levels here in what you're saying to me that it's hard for me to tease apart exactly what it all means. So first of all, if you have a niche called communicating with my kids, I think that you're going to need to drill down a little bit. You're going to need to get more specific, okay? Because parents don't want to communicate with their kids. They actually want something specific from the outcome. They want their kids to hug them more, or they want their kids to stop screaming, or they want their kids to clean their room more often, or they want their kids to stop being violent and hitting, right? There are very specific things that parents want, and communication is almost always a means to that end. So I'd drill down further. Next, when you're talking about emotively relate to the parents to create an environment, I think you've got to get more specific about what you want to accomplish here. I think what you got to do, Larry, is ask, what does the parent want the kid to do? And then you've got to ask yourself, what can I teach them specifically that will get the kid to do the thing that the parent wants the kid to do? So, for example, if the kid is 2 years old and it is always screaming and hitting, and the parent wants that to stop, the parent may think, well, I need to learn how to communicate better with my kid. But they want to learn how to communicate better so that the kid stops screaming and throwing things and hitting or whatever they're doing that's misbehavior. So what you have to do is you have to say, I'm going to teach you a technique here that if you use this, you'll be able to communicate in this specific way that I'm going to teach you, and that's going to result in your child not screaming, not hitting. So you have to get more specific about everything that you're trying to do here. When you're talking about communicating with the kids and emotively relating and creating an environment, these are all at the highest level, again, way out there in terms of very abstract. And you need to get more specific with yourself so that we can then figure out how to get specific with what you're trying to do. Okay. Here's a question from Perry. Eben, regarding specificity, am I not opening myself up to false advertising or customer backlash or liability if the customer doesn't get the results that I have promised, which may be due to no fault of my own, i.e. due to lack of customer motivation? Yeah, this is an interesting one, Perry. Part of I'm going to get a little abstract myself right here. Go up to a little bit more general level. Business is interesting in that before we own a business, before we have to take responsibility for our communication and our marketing and the products and the results we deliver, when we have a job, which almost all of us have had many jobs, we just, we think that whoever owns the business is on easy street, and we think that we deserve more. This is one of the responsibilities that you have to take on. This is one of the challenges that, as a business owner, you have to take responsibility for. So, by being specific, what you need to do is talk about things that are real, that are believable, that you can make happen, and that really work, so that you're not making false claims. And you need to say, if you will do the thing that I tell you, in the way that I tell you, you will get the result. One of the things that I like to do is I say, hey, do the thing that I tell you to do. Here's the result you'll get. And if you don't like it, if you don't believe it, you don't get the result, here's a guarantee. So that, it sets it up inside of a context that feels very ethical and responsible and so forth. But bottom line is, everything, when you open your eyes and you get out of bed in the morning, you open yourself up to false advertising, customer backlash, and liability. It's part of being a human being and being alive. Now, of course, you're going to want to do everything, very ethically, with the highest level of honesty and integrity. And while you're doing that, you have to remember that this is the way to communicate with other humans so that they actually believe you. Okay. Okay, here's a question from Dave. Having just now created my website copy and about to launch it, would you recommend that I wait until I have an actual product to launch where I can be very specific, as you're discussing here, or should I start with my free newsletter offering and build my contacts and following first? Okay, so as a general rule, Dave, don't wait to do anything. Waiting is what really gets us in trouble. So you're going to learn a lot by just taking action. As we'll be discussing in future trainings, one of the keys is to just create a lot of content. Okay, that's one of the keys. Daily, if possible. If you can create a daily blog post or a daily newsletter or a daily video of some kind, what you're going to do is you'll sit down and you'll review, okay, why, what, how, what if? And you'll make a little outline for yourself. And then you'll say, okay, great, next, specific, concrete, emotional, connected to the result. And you'll get into the mindset of asking, okay, what's the result that the person wants? We've already kind of talked about that in the why, what, how, what if. All right, we're going to stay focused on that result. Okay, next, we're going to be specific and concrete. Okay, got to remember to give them specific things, specific actions, step-by-step things to do. Okay, emotional. All right, what's the thing that they're really afraid of happening? What's the thing that they really desire to have happen? Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more of that. And you keep layering these things in, and you get better and better and better at doing it. Again, they're layers that you're adding to your internal processing. So don't wait to do anything. Start right now. Taking action, building a subscriber base, you definitely want to be doing that immediately. But it's a great question. Okay, question from Moten. Do we also integrate the 4 learning styles into these 4 factors as well? Yes, of course. And like anything, there's some overlap between the 2 of them. But what we're trying to do here is, in the 4 learning styles, we're talking about a distinction of 4 different ways that people learn and 4 different ways to teach. And what I'm doing here is coming down to more specific, tangible, like exactly what you do with your communication, so that you don't stay up in the land of generality and the means to things and something that's not really believable. You really are always focused on helping the prospect get exactly what they want and giving them the steps to do it. Okay. This is an interesting question from Tom. Kind of off topic, but I like it. When talking to someone about their problems, say via Skype, do you record the call to study it later? If so, do you need their consent? I do not recommend recording anything without someone's consent. You have to check your laws. This is something you're going to want to check legally if you're going to do that. There are some states where if you're on one side of a conversation, I think you can record it legally, etc. But I recommend anytime you're going to be recording anything, tell the person on the other end. And in most cases, I've found even having deep personal conversations, other folks will, be fine with the recording. If you're, let's say you're helping people lose weight. If you're doing a consultation with someone and you're going to ask them a bunch of questions, if you say, one of the things I'm really trying to do here is understand exactly what people want when they want to lose weight. I want to understand exactly what's challenging them, etc. Now, I'm going to be taking notes here as we have this conversation, but would it be okay with you if I record this so that I can review it later, so I can really go back over what you said and incorporate what you said into my content and my product? Most people are going to say yes to that, okay? Probably 90 or 95% are going to say yes. So, anything that you're doing surreptitiously or kind of secretly, if it feels weird, it's probably not the right thing to do. Okay. Next here. It's a question from Louisa. How do you quantify reduction in stress? How do you make measurements of stress so that it's specific and concrete? I can do the emotional and the result bit, but the specific and concrete bit is not very clear to me. Okay, excellent. So I'm actually been planning and working on a program about stress myself, and so I feel your pain, so to speak. Stress is one of those things that seems to be a real phenomenon, but it's very abstract, right? It's a generalized response to a lot of different kinds of input. So what I'd do is I would ask your potential customers what specifically is triggering their stress and what specifically is the frustration or the problem that the stress is causing. If you're talking mostly to, let's say, parents, they're going to have very different answers than if you're talking to, let's say, business people. Okay, so you got to get with your customers there. You got to figure out specifically what are the things that are triggering their stress and what are the problems that the stress is causing so that you can dig in a little bit deeper. Stress is a big topic. I think that by talking to your customers, you'll be able to get a lot more specific insights from them. Okay, here's a question from MC. Thank you, Eben. Can you give me a few more examples using all 4 factors, losing 15 pounds of weight in 90 days to get back into your skinny jeans? I think you just did it right there. If somebody loses 15 pounds in 90 days and they can fit back into their skinny jeans, that's it. That's specific, it's concrete, it's emotional, and it's connected to a result. To really dive into this, the whole idea of fit back into your skinny jeans, that's an ingenious one that I've heard several weight loss coaches and so forth talk about. Because if you ask a group of women who would like to lose weight, if you say, do you still have your skinny jeans, most of them will say yes. It's one of those weird phenomenons, like if you want to blow a man's mind and get him to think you're psychic, You wave your hands and you say, I can see something. I can see a watch that's in a drawer. It's a watch that stopped working. Someone important to you gave you the watch. It stopped working, but you can't bear to throw it away, so it's sitting in a drawer. Well, almost all men have a watch that's broken, that's sitting in a drawer somewhere that they can't bear to throw away because, the important person in their life gave it to them. So skinny jeans, if you can find something that's that specific, that concrete, that emotional, and that connected to the result, now you're really, really doing a good job. I don't know if there is an example better than that one, MC, so I'm just going to leave you with that one. It was a good one, though. And then here's a question from Liru. If my niche is diet and energy, what words would you use? Okay, so I once had a conversation with Bill Phillips, who is the author of Body for Life, best-selling fitness book, I think, in history, also a self-made multi-hundred millionaire. And he said something interesting. He said, in my book, I never use the word diet. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And that alone gave me a tremendous amount of insight into communication and into marketing and creating information products. Right? Just that one thing. Right? Why doesn't he use the word diet? Because diet is a word that people don't like, and it's a word that's overused, and it sounds like it's hard work. Well, what could you say instead of diet? Well, you could say eating plan. Okay, you could get even more specific, and you could say, a high energy breakfast recipe. Okay, so what is recipe? Recipe sounds like it's exactly step by step how to do it, and you can keep getting even more and more specific. Right? You could say the high energy breakfast recipe of greens and fruit. Okay, so I'm drilling down here and getting more and more specific. So I don't know what words to use because I don't know exactly what you're doing here. Diet and energy are big categories. But again, what I do is I talk to your customers, talk to people who would like to, I think, lose weight and have more energy. I imagine if you're talking about diet and energy, and ask them, what's your biggest fear or frustration? What is it that you want? What's the outcome that you want? And why? And ask where they're feeling low energy and what that's causing, and ask why they want to feel more energy and what they're going to do with it, and listen for the patterns, because patterns always emerge. And then once you have them, go ahead and write them down and start using them to communicate specifically, concretely, emotionally, and connect to the result. Okay, Philip. Okay, here's a relevant question. I have a blog going now, and I'm finishing up my first product. But how to keep coming up with all the free content in the marketing? So that is a good question. We're going to cover that actually in a very specific future couple of trainings, so I'm not going to dive into it right now. But I'll give you a little hint in advance. There are 100 different ways to talk about anything. And what I challenge you to do is to sit down and ask, how could I teach this exact same thing 3 different ways? And every one of them would be just as interesting as the others. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that. It's a hint, but we're going to dive very deeply into that question in the future. Okay, here's a question from Jared. Hi, Eben. I'm the emotional health niche. Hi, Eben. I am in the emotional health niche as a counselor. The way I've been communicating has been Okay, here we go. The way I've been communicating has been live in expanded states of joy, freedom, and awareness. Okay. You didn't give me a question there, but you've given me some great examples of how to communicate as non-specifically, as abstractly, and as kind of not connected to the result as possible. You might say that this is emotional and it's a result because you're talking about, states of joy, freedom, and awareness. But when you say a state of joy, freedom, and awareness, it doesn't trigger a state of joy, freedom, and awareness. Right? A great example that I like to use is, you notice when you go see a great movie that's very dramatic and very engaging, that the actors don't come walking out into the scene and look at the camera and say, feel sadness, right? Could you imagine an actor in a movie turning to the camera and saying, feel jealousy, feel anger? It doesn't compute. That's not the way humans work, okay? The way humans work is the actor comes home and she sees lipstick prints on a glass and she furrows her brow, and you realize that she knows that those aren't her lipstick prints, and she's now suspicious because it seems like another woman with lipstick has been in the house, and you immediately start to feel for her what it would feel like to suspect that your spouse is cheating on you. The earlier example of lose 15 pounds in 90 days and fit into your skinny jeans, right? This is much more emotion triggering than living in expanded states of joy, freedom, and awareness, right? So the more concrete you can make it, the better. And because you didn't ask a question, I'm not going to answer one. Okay, from Pete. Aren't being specific and giving concrete details actually the same thing? So they're related, but specific is about saying something like 15 rather than saying something like a lot. Concrete is about saying something like lose 15 pounds, right, which is like something that happens out here in reality, versus feel really great about yourself, which is an abstract concept that there would be no way to tell whether or not a person actually felt great about themselves, because there's no test for that. So specificity is about coming down to the most granular level and talking about it in the most detailed microscopic way, right? Putting your microscope on it. And concrete is about it's actually something tangible in the physical world, something that happened in some way, that if there was a camera on it watching and a group of 10 people around watching the replay, they would all say, yes, that thing actually happened. So the number 15 is specific, but it's not concrete. Okay? 15 pounds is both specific and concrete because it's 15 pounds. And if you even got more specific and more concrete, you could say 15 pounds of fat. And if you wanted to get more specific and more concrete, you could say 15 pounds of belly fat. Right? You see how I'm getting even more specific here and more concrete, making it less able to confuse. And, by the way, as I do that, you notice what also happens? It becomes more emotional and more connected to the result that the person wants. Okay, so 15 pounds, how emotional is that? Kind of emotional. The result, 15 pounds, lose 15 pounds, yeah. When I say 15 pounds of fat, now that's a lot more emotional. And it's also a lot more connected to the result. I definitely want to lose 15 pounds of fat more than I just want to lose 15 pounds. And then when I dive even deeper and I go 15 pounds of belly fat, that's much more emotional because it really plays to the vanity, the insecurity, the health, all those issues. And it's much more connected to the result, much more specific. Okay, here's a question from Scott. By the way, really, again, really great questions here. And we're really getting to the heart of the matter. I'm writing articles on my blog about divorce, and it is such a wide and broad topic that I need to go deeper. Yes, you are right, Scott. The key for most people is to be financially okay, yet how do I communicate what they need? All right. So you have to understand, Scott, that when you say the key for most people is to be financially okay, these are very abstract ideas. Financially okay, right? Just think about how abstract that is and how that means so many different things for so many different people. I would challenge you to ask your potential customers or ask people who've been through a divorce, what was your biggest fear and what was your biggest frustration? You know, to some, financially okay might mean that they get to leave without any money and they don't wind up having, to be in massive debt. To another person, financially okay might mean that they get a lot of child support. To another person, to be financially okay might mean that they don't have to pay very much child support. So you got to drill down very specifically, and you got to figure out what financially okay means. When you say here the key for most people is to be financially okay, what you're really saying is the generalization of what people want is to be financially okay. What they really want, what they fantasize about when they're going to sleep at night and they can't stop worrying is something specific. Okay? They do not sit there in their mind and make a picture of the words financially okay. They're thinking about not being able to make their car payment. They're thinking about having to move back in with their parents. They're thinking about writing checks every month for a lot of money or receiving checks every month for a lot of money. There's something specific that's the big deal that's triggering all of this. But great question. Okay, next question from Joan. If I'm writing a letter in a campaign, how much do I share of my story and myself, tying it into specific, concrete, and emotional results? Thank you, Joan. So, Joan, it's even more important when you're telling your story to be specific and concrete and emotional. So, for example, if I'm teaching a course on how to get out of debt, and I say, I used to be deeply in debt, and now I'm free of debt, and I'm going to show you how to get free of debt too. Okay, this is all very abstract. If I say, I can remember the day when I opened up my credit card bills and I had passed $30,000 in credit card debt, and I was making $500 a month in payments, and these were the minimum payments. And I can remember doing the math in my head and thinking to myself, I am never going to get out of debt for the rest of my life. Now, I can also remember the day when I wrote the check to pay off the last credit card that I had. And I remember the feeling of being freed from a prison or a cage that I had when I wrote that check paying off my last credit card. And then I took out my scissors and I cut that credit card up and I threw it away and I canceled it, never to use it again. So you see the two ends of the spectrum here, right? Now I'm telling my story, but it's told very differently. The more specific you can be, especially when you're talking about details that are emotional, the better. Okay. Next question. From Frank. One question that I have is almost being too graphic. I'm in the weight loss market for men. Okay, so I don't exactly know what you mean here. Are you saying, can you be too graphic? I think you can go overboard. I think some movies go a little overboard with the violence and the blood and the guts and the shooting and all that kind of thing. But when you're talking about something that's important to a person, I don't know that you can get too graphic. Something that comes to mind is there was a drunk driving campaign that was done several years ago, where I think it was this beautiful young woman. She was hit by a drunk driver, and I can't remember all the details, but something happened. A car caught on fire, and it burned off her face, and she essentially had no nose. And they used her picture in advertising to encourage people not to drink and drive. Would you say that was too graphic? Maybe not. The consequences, if people are drinking and driving, are great, and I think we need to look at them. Most people, this is something to remember, most people don't face reality. They don't actually look at what's going to happen to them if they don't change their behavior. And they don't look at what's going to happen if they do change their behavior. They think of it, in a very idealistic way. When someone's thinking about going on a diet and eating a certain way for 90 days and then fitting into their skinny jeans, they're usually not thinking about all of the real implications. And they're also not really thinking about all of what it's really going to mean if they lose the weight, all the positive and negative things. So I don't really think you can get too graphic as long as you do it in a way that's always connected to the person getting the result that they want. And, of course, as long as you do it in a way that is legal and ethical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, there is a line you can cross, but as long as you're doing it in a caring, almost, clinical kind of, I don't want to say clinical like detached, but you're doing it in a way that that is classy, I don't think you can be too graphic. Okay. Okay, here we go. It's a good one from Jeremy. Question. Here's some copy I sent out today to try to goose business next. Okay, please advise on how I did. Here's the quote from his copy. If you think you/your company might be interested in a private on-site class where I teach your team personally how to overcome your computer management challenges, then just buzz me. We can talk about what your challenges are and how a GP class can help you out. Then we'll fit into your schedule. The sooner you call, the sooner you get over this issue your company has, and you'll be happier and more productive. So, great job sending out a marketing promotion, offering a one-on-one class. You're doing great there, but I think you can get a lot more specific here. Okay, and I think you can be a lot more concrete and emotional. So the first thing that comes to me and comes to mind is how to overcome your computer management challenges. Computer management, that just sounds like a huge bin full of all kinds of things. And I'll bet that there are only a few things. This is the way it essentially always is, but there are a few things that are really frustrating in the office or the environment that you're talking about here that are computer management challenges. I mean, I've been in business for a while. I don't actually even know what computer management challenges are. Do you mean managing the computers themselves? Do you mean managing people using a computer? You know what? I don't actually know what it means. Maybe this is a technical term inside the business that you're in, but I would just get specific. I would figure out what is their biggest computer management challenge and talk about how to solve it. I also think that by being general here, you say, if you think that you/your company might be interested, if you think they might be interested, that sounds a little weak to me. I've said things like that, but I'm always intending to be soft. I'm trying to soften something up. In this case, I think you could be a lot stronger because you're talking about a personal class where you're teaching. I would figure out what that specific thing is, and I would say, I'm going to come over there and I'm going to help you get rid of this frustration. It's going to take an hour. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call me, and we'll schedule a time. All this other stuff of fit into your schedule, the sooner you call, the sooner you'll get over the issue your company has. Very general. You got to figure out what that specific thing is. Okay. Next. Just hunting through some of these. We've already covered some of these kind of generally. Here's a question from Vida. When you spoke about factor 4 connected to results, did you say that you need to find the bottom need underneath the surface need from the customer? If someone says, I want to pay off my debt, is that the core need, or do I inquire about what would they have if they paid off the debt? So yes, in fact, what you want to do, Vida, is you want to keep asking and keep digging until you run out. Okay, so you want to ask, okay, so what's the most frustrating part of being in debt? What do you worry about happening if you stay in debt? What happens if your debt gets worse, right? You want to just keep going. When you're laying in bed at night, going to sleep, do you ever worry about debt? Yeah, okay, what do you worry about? What are the pictures you make? What are the scenarios that come up in your mind? And then if they say, if you say to them, okay, what are you going to do once you get out of debt? Why do you want to get out of debt? And they say, well, I'd like to be able to retire by age 65. Okay, great. What's the next question I'm going to ask? Why do you want to retire at 65? They say, I want to retire at 65 because my parents worked until they died, and I consider that to be, a real shame, and I don't want to die like my parents working, and I really feel like it's going to be a sense of I made it in the world as a person if I can retire at age 65. All right, now we're getting closer to skinny jeans. Now we're talking about something that's really personally important to the other human being. Their parents died, working, and they want to avoid that. And they feel like what it means to be successful as a person is retiring at age 65. You would never know that stuff by just talking to getting out of debt. So yes, you got to keep drilling. You got to drill deeper. Okay, let's see here. All right, here's a question from Stephen. I have a gift for humor. How does humor increase the value of communication, like Frank Kern? And can you run the risk of entertaining too much and actually decreasing believability and therefore decreasing value? Or does the humor connect in the emotional factor? This is an excellent question, Stephen. I personally recommend in the beginning that you do not use humor. It almost always is a bad idea. If you do start using it, introduce it a little bit at a time, and as you figure out how to make it work, then you can. Now, I've used humor in some of my newsletters. I've used it a lot. Sometimes I use it a little bit in my videos. What we have to remember is, to most people, whatever it is that they are doing, when it comes down to like brass tacks and the real world, most people don't find their frustration or their desire funny. Okay, so just think about that for a minute. They don't find it funny or cute. They've got a real challenge in life. Somebody who, has 30 extra pounds of belly fat, or someone that's $20,000 in credit card debt, or someone who is experiencing very, very low energy, or someone who wants to improve in a certain area of life, they're not in their mind joking around about it. Okay, they're serious. So when you introduce humor to a situation where the other person doesn't find it funny, I think you start running into challenges. So here's a question from Shannon. It actually kind of came in a couple parts here in between things, so I got to put it together. From Shannon. Hi, Eben. I understand the concept, but when you're starting out with a new product and developing after research, how do you use specific quotes in the initial testing stage when you don't have any results? So this isn't about whether or not you have results or you've proven anything. What it's about is the way that you communicate. Okay? It's about not communicating abstractly. It's about communicating concretely. So if, for example, I'm going to teach someone a simple eating plan so that they can lose 20 pounds of belly fat, I don't have to have written 20 books on it and had 1 million people use the system to say, I'm going to show you specifically what foods to eat, and then to start talking about which meals you're going to show them, talking about, probably in your content, you're going to want to move the free line and give away some of those recipes or some of those meal plans. You're going to want to talk about the outcomes that the person wants by losing weight or increasing energy or whatever it is that they're trying to do. The point is that it's a way of communicating. It's not about how much work you've done or how much experience that you've had. I hope that distinction makes sense to you. Okay. On next here. Okay, here's a question from Ian. Is this specific enough for a headline? Give me just 11 minutes twice a week, and I guarantee to eliminate your back pain for the rest of your life without the need for fancy equipment, chiropractors, doctors, or harmful medication. Okay, so we're jumping ahead here, and we're taking this to an extreme because where you want to use this is in marketing. But yes, this is what we're trying to get to. Okay, this is really the end game of the kind of communication we're learning here. Right? So give me just 11 minutes twice a week, and I guarantee to eliminate your back pain for the rest of your life without the need for fancy equipment, chiropractors, doctors, or harmful medication. Now, as usual, as when I'm giving you communication and marketing tips, I cannot say whether or not something is legal to say or ethical to say. You have to figure that out on your own, and I do recommend that you check with professionals on that. But this is exactly the type of communication that we're trying to get to. It's a great example. Okay, let's see here. So Michael asks, an article, Skincare for Men. Men need to care for their skin as much as women, yet ignore the health of their skin at their peril. How would you create more emotion for this? Okay, so it's very important, Michael, that you don't try to make someone want something. You got to find something they already want. Now, I assume by the way you asked this that you realized that they need to work on their skin. They didn't realize it. So you're going to want to find an area where they have already realized it. Now, if I'm wrong, and by the way, I've heard that plastic surgery for men is up like 500% in the last few years, and men are becoming very vain and starting to work on their skin. So this might be a good niche. What I think you need to do is drill down and figure out specifically what is the big fear or frustration or challenge that the man is trying to solve, and then you introduce your skincare that way. So, for example, maybe you find men who are over the age of 50 that want to look younger, and then that's your way into skincare. Or maybe it's men who have wrinkles on their face but don't want to have surgery, and that's your way in. The point is, it's got to be based on a need that's already out there. You're not trying to create emotion. You're trying to find someone that already has the emotion and they're looking for a solution. Okay. Just hunting through here. We've already covered a few of these. All right, here's a question from Nate. Eben, I'm working on launching a fat loss online training course for women. I'd like to get an example of how to integrate the 4 factors with the complete communication model as applied to the fat loss for women niche. Do we use each of the 4 factors in each of the 4 parts of complete communication, or how does it mix up? So we're not going for perfect here, Nate. What we're going for is improvement. Okay, we're trying to add a little bit more every time we communicate. We don't want to get hung up and, you know what? I did this and I got the why, the what, and the how, but I forgot the what if. And you know what? I was pretty specific and concrete, and I was talking about the result, but I don't know if this is the most emotional way to say it. You know what? I'm going to throw it away. We don't want to do that. Okay. What we want to do is we want to use a little why, what, how, and then be very specific about what we're teaching. Okay, great. Next time we come back, now we're going to use why, what, how. We're going to try to get that action step in there, that what if, definitely get them out to take action. And we're going to be talking about an emotional result. And, maybe this time you weren't quite as specific or concrete as that you'd like to be. Interestingly enough, we're mostly using language here, right? When we're talking, we're creating information products that are often books, audio programs, training programs, coaching, we're usually using words to communicate. And when you're using words, interestingly enough, you can't be perfectly specific. You can't be perfectly concrete. You can't be perfectly emotional, connected to the result, because it's a word. And a word itself already isn't the thing that it describes. So even if I talk about a red apple that weighs 4 ounces, that's a specific shade of red, that has a specific color of stem. I mean, I can go down to a lot of levels of detail, and I can never be perfectly specific because, again, I'm using words. I have to just show you the apple if I want to get perfectly specific. So the answer here, just keep incorporating these over and over and over. And if you could see, much of my earlier work that I did when I first got started in information products, you'd laugh and you'd say, wow, you weren't doing most of this stuff in some of your early marketing and some of your early stuff. And I would say, you're right. I knew some of it. I didn't know most of it probably. A lot of it I had to discover over time. But you can still do pretty well. What I'm trying to do is, save you 10 years of trial and error and just give you the points, and then you can start plugging them in. If you'll just use these as checklists and review them before you create your content in your products, or every time you sit down to write or create a video, you will do much, much better. Just kind of keep working on it from there. Okay, next. From Joseph. How do you know if you're getting what they really want versus what they say they want? How do you figure out exactly what they want? Listen harder, ask more questions, interact with more people, or do you draw the conclusions yourself? Perhaps you have to use both. So you're right here. You do listen harder, you do ask more questions, and you do interact with more people. The patterns will emerge, but you have to use the questions and the formats that I'm teaching you here. Okay? So what a lot of folks will do is they go, well, I don't know if I want to really ask people what they worry about. I'm not comfortable. So they're talking to people who want to lose weight, and they say things like, do you worry about not being able to lose weight? And the person says, yes. Well, in that case, you've led the witness. You've told them what to say. When you ask, what do you worry about? And it's an open question. Or you ask even more specifically, when you're laying in bed at night going to sleep and you're worrying, what are the pictures that you're making in your mind? What are they? Okay, that's a more specific question, more powerful. When you ask, what's your big fear or frustration? When you ask, what's the outcome that you would really hate to have happen? Okay, you're even getting more specific. Try to leave these questions open, but make sure that you're getting specific answers. You're looking for the irrational. Okay, the irrational. All right, hunting through here. Just one or two more. Okay, this is from Jared. Looks like this might be a second part of his question. In the emotional health niche as a counselor, the way I've been communicating has been live in expanded states of joy, freedom, and awareness. How do I make it more concrete? Example, in 2 hours, you'll be completely relieved of the burdens that keep you weighted down. Okay, so just like I was saying before, you're doing better, right? Because you've got the 2 hours in there, but completely relieved and burdens that keep you weighted down. This is so abstract and non-specific that it's actually metaphorical. Okay, burdens keep you weighted down. The literal interpretation of that would be that someone is carrying a goat on their shoulders and it's weighting them down, and what you're going to do is remove the goat. Okay, so you got to talk more specifically. You've got to figure out exactly what it is that's going to happen. Why do they want to live in these states? What's triggering them to be in the states that they don't want to be in? Here's a question from Bruce. Hi, Eben. Where exactly do we use these 4 factors? In our surveys, articles, landing page, sales page, communication? Yes, everywhere. The short answer is everywhere. This is how you want to start communicating from now on. Here's a question from Stephen. Hi, Evan. I'm offering training for entrepreneurs in stress relief techniques designed to help with clarity and decision making. They include breathing, meditation, calming, and centering. Can you offer specific language I might employ? Well, what I would do is I would first ask you to ask these entrepreneurs if it's about clarity and decision making. Is this something that they're looking for? Do they want clarity in decision making? And I'd ask what types of decisions and what's the potential positive and negative outcomes of these decisions. If they make the decision right, what happens? If they make the decision wrong, what happens? And then use those things as the keys. So, for example, let's say that you're teaching entrepreneurs about making a decision on hiring someone. Okay, that's a completely different type of decision than what product to release next, right? So you have to ask them, okay, well, what's your big frustration or challenge right now, or what's your desire or outcome? And they'll say, well, I have trouble making decisions about hiring people. You say, okay, great. What kind of decisions? When? What makes it worse? What do you worry about in the making of the decision? And you might find that the real key issue that all these entrepreneurs that you're dealing with are, maybe they're facing how much to pay people. They're afraid that they're going to pay too much. Well, it's very different to give a set of techniques so that you can make the right decision about how much to pay someone than, stress relief techniques to have clarity in decision making, which again is all very high level of specificity and abstraction. Okay, from Frank, another return visit. When I'm explaining to my male weight loss customers about the embarrassment taking their shirt off at the beach, I'm afraid of offending them with too much embarrassing detail, such as my customers are very concerned about man boobs, white flabby belly, the perception that everyone is staring at them. I fear that I would actually turn them off with some sales copy because it hits home too much and they actually avoid my copy. If I'm using the words that my customers use, how big a risk do I run by being too graphic, specific, concrete, emotional about their current embarrassment? Frank, I don't think that as long as you don't make them bad and wrong, right, you don't want to say you're a loser because you look bad at the beach and because you have man boobs. But if you are saying, if you're embarrassed about taking your shirt off at the beach because, you have man boobs and you know that people are looking at you, that's straight up, that's straightforward. If you really want to take this up a level, if you've ever been in this situation, which I don't know if you have, Frank, but if you tell the story about how you went to the beach and you took your shirt off and you started noticing people looking at you and you looked down and you noticed your man boobs and you realized that they were unattractive and so forth, right? That's another way to do it, but I don't think you're being too graphic here. I mean, these are the things that people care about. Okay. Just hunting through for one last question here. From Scott, last one. Can you speak to why it seems that specific and concrete and connected to results all seem to be logical, while emotional is the opposite of logical? You're probably a logical guy, Scott. That's probably why you think that specific and concrete and connected to results are logical. You can view them all through a logical lens, okay? So if I say, lose 15 pounds of fat around your hips and thighs in 90 days so you can fit into your skinny jeans again, you might, as a logical person, say, well, that's all perfectly logical, right? Of course I want to lose 15 pounds so that I can fit into my skinny jeans. That'll save me money from having to go out and buy more jeans. Perfectly logical. But talk to a woman who hasn't fit into her skinny jeans in 10 years about how emotional it is when she hears about losing that fat and fitting into those jeans, and you're not talking logical anymore. So that's why it's layers. That's why there are factors here. We're not just talking specific and concrete and connected to the result. alone. We're talking about them in a way that it's also emotional. These techniques, these approaches, they challenge you to think. Okay, they actually challenge you to use your mind. And what I'm secretly teaching you here, okay, I'll give you a little insight. What I'm secretly teaching you here is how to communicate better with yourself and with other human beings so that you get more of what you want from yourself and more of what you want with other human beings. This is what I think we need to be learning in the education system, right? I wish someone would have taught me this stuff when I was in school, because this is what allows us to take the ideas we have in our head, put them out into the world in the form of video, audio, print, spoken word with other people, and make that idea appear inside the head of the other person and the emotions and the feelings of the other person more and more and more accurately. In the beginning, we have to practice because we don't know this stuff. So you got to use your brain, you got to use your mind, you got to review it and focus on it. But eventually what happens is when you start talking to other people, when you start thinking about your customers, when you sit down to create a piece of content, a marketing piece, your mind switches to a different, kind of a different mode, and you think, what's the outcome that they want? What is frustrating them right now? How would I describe the specific outcome that they want in tangible, concrete language, right? What's the thing that's just the most motivating to them? And you'll see it in your mind, and you'll see the woman reaching up and taking down her skinny jeans that she's had, up in a storage bag for 10 years, and you'll see her putting them on and standing in front of the mirror and turning around and smiling. And when you think of that and you can see her doing that in your mind, and then you kind of work backwards and you say, okay, what are all the action steps she's going to need to take? How do I talk about this in a way that gets her really motivated? How do I talk to the reason why? How do I talk to the what and the theory, the science and the history, and how do I talk to the how-to? How do I create a little set of steps, a recipe for her? And then what does she need to do right now? What's the action step she needs to take? And it all happens very fast because it's something that you've practiced. And again, what we're secretly learning here is actually how to communicate with ourselves and with others so that we get more of what we want in life, and we align it with our own needs, and we align it with the needs of others, and ultimately we align it with the needs of all of us. Okay, so don't just think that this is marketing tactics or that this is some kind of technique for creating products. This is really what the game is all about in the big picture of life. Okay, great. You're doing great. These are really great questions. I feel like we're turning an important corner here in the program. Make sure and keep your eye on your email. You're getting a lot of really, really great training right now. So dig in. In the next week or two, we're actually going to move on, and we're going to be learning how to put our concepts together in different ways, package up, format products, and then we'll move on to marketing. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again soon. All right. Bye-bye.